Hi friends, I'm Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and the other day one of my subscribers asked me if I might do a video showing the books that I think are most helpful for reading tarot, and I'm going on the assumption that she meant Tarot of Marseille or non-scenic pit cards because that's mostly what my feed is about. And for the life of me, I can't find the email and or where it was. So I think the subscriber's name was Kim R. So Kim R, if it was you, thank you for the question, and hopefully it will be of interest to others who are watching. Now, having whatever books I mention in this video, bear in mind that none of them were available when I was learning how to read tarot. And I wish they had been, you know, because I was at a distinct disadvantage, as a kid growing up in suburban Philadelphia in a little town called Media, Pennsylvania. And, there wasn't nothing. There was nothing on tarot. I mean, when tarot arrived in the 60s in the United States, it was on a television show, which I mentioned a number of times in my blogs and maybe in other videos. And then, a couple of years later, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck came out. And then, so, and then all the information about tarot was basically on Rider-Waite-Smith because, let's face it, it was a little bit easier to read, because every picture tells a story. So it was really hard to learn how to read tarot, and the best that I could do was try to make sense of what I was looking at. And then, on the Scenic cards, the 22 cards, the trump cards and the Fool, and then trying to make sense of the number cards and the suit cards, the number and suit. Because let's face it, when we're looking at a deck of TDM or non-scenic pip style cards, we have 22 specific images. We have court cards, right? People on suit cards. And then we also have number and suit. So the way that I understood and made sense of what I was looking at was I had to come up with a way to interpret number and suit, and number and suit together, people, and whatever age they appear or whatever accomplished level they have achieved, whether they were a child as in a page or a subordinate, as in a page or a valet, or as a queen or as a knight or as a king, right? So I had to make sense of all that plus their suit. And then I had to try to understand what I was looking at in the 22 trump cards. So I didn't have all this information, and, as I learned information, then I was able to improve my skill set because I had greater understanding of what I was looking at. And a lot of the books that I used to learn tarot were art history books or whatever, tarot history I was able to come upon, At any rate, I am a teacher of tarot now. And when I asked what books do I recommend to my students, I recommend the books that I wish I had, when I was learning. And when I've read any of these books, I always learned something. Now, the first book that I think any serious TDM reader must have, and I mean it, is the Reading the Marseille Tarot by J.M. David. And I recommend this book, even though it is most specifically talking about the Noblette or the Noble Tarot deck, but it talks about TDM in general, and it has so much information, across history and cultures that I just don't know how you could not read this book. It's a tome, it's got over 500 pages, and it's dense, I mean, it talks about things that are not even tarot related, so it's really very interesting. So I think if you really want to dig into TDM and you really want to understand where it's coming from and what it's about, I would say this book is a must-have. Now, it's not going to teach you how to read tarot. You know, it's just not going to do that. It's not going to say, this is how you read tarot, right? But it's going to teach you what you're looking at. And as I mentioned already earlier in this little speech, you're looking at pictures. And it's okay to look at a picture of a woman in a garden, right? A general woman in a garden, and just say, oh, okay, you know, there's a woman in a garden. And maybe that's all you need to know. But maybe the woman in the garden is Mary Magdalene in exile once, you know, after Christ's crucifixion. And maybe she's Mary Magdalene in Marseille, you know. That gives you a whole different story and a whole different point, you know, of knowing who she is and what her story is, and a whole new dimension into understanding what it is that you're interpreting. The next book that I think is helpful, which one do I pick first? Okay, well, we'll do this one, the open reading by Yov Ben-Dov. And now this one is not so much interested in showing you or teaching you what you're looking at, right? This one's not going to teach you the symbols of the cards or what it is, you know, what that they mean. This book will help you notice patterns in the way the cards are laid, you know. Maybe you'll notice a lot of X's or a lot of curves or, you know, several mandala shapes that might remind you, you know, of something else, you know. So this one, not so much that it's going to help you understand the symbols of what you're looking at, which I think are very important because after all, the cards are symbols, right? But it will help you understand directionality and patterns and how to notice them more readily. And I think a combination of knowing what you're looking at and picking up on patterns are both very important elements of a tarot reading. You know, sometimes when I do a reading, even if even though I know the origin stories of the cards, and even if I understand their own individual meanings, sometimes I'm just hit over the head by a pattern that's just, whoa, how do you can't ignore this pattern, you know? And so then the pattern becomes more important, you know, sometimes than the origin story. So I think it's legitimate and important to know origin story and pattern. So I think these two books, as I mentioned so far, are really good books to get you thinking along those lines. Now, another really good book that I think most people will benefit from, and probably if you only buy one, maybe you'll buy this one because it's not very expensive and you won't have to invest, you know, 2 months reading it. you know, you could read it rather quickly. Is the Untold Tarot by Caitlin Matthews. And the reason I like this is because it's a combination of those things that I said. You will get a certain amount of history from the book, and you'll also, you know, understand, you know, and she'll show, you know, directions. And the other thing that I really like about what she does with this book is that she shows you a bunch of different tarot decks, and I'm going to try to thumb through so you can see pictures. Of course, we're not seeing any pictures, right? But she uses a bunch of different tarot. Shucks. Let's try this again. She shows several different tarot decks, all of, you know, either the TDM variety or pip style. And I own every deck in this book except for one, and the only reason I don't own it is because I never liked it and I never wanted to buy it. But I may buy it just so I have it. Kind of interesting to have every deck that an author uses in a book. And usually when you see a tarot forum and people are new to TDM and they say, what book should I get? Which book? You see that all the time. This is usually a book that somebody mentions. Somebody always mentions this book. You know, like I said, it's inexpensive. I paid under $30 for it. It's a quick read and it's engaging. And even though I didn't necessarily agree with all her interpretations, I can see how she got there, you know. And I think that's important because when you're learning tarot, you need to understand, I think, well, how did she get that answer, you know? And I think she does a decent job in explaining how she got her answers. Not in every example, but in most, I think she did. And another one of the books that's always referenced in tarot forums is this one, in pattern reading. This one, usually someone like me mentions it, like a real tarot geek will mention this book, but it's not for everyone because it's expensive, you know. I think it's, I don't know, I paid a couple bucks for this book, and it's, you know, big, and it's an investment of time, right? And you have to really, really, really want to know, you know. So, but, you know, I think if you're a serious person, this is the book. You know, this is one of them anyway. And another book that a lot of people recommend, and I'm not saying I do because I parted ways with this author, but the Alejandro Jodorowsky book, The Way of Tarot, The Spiritual Teacher in the Cards. And a lot of people, you know, I think this book is outstanding. And if you want to do a little research on it before you buy it, you know, maybe it will be helpful to you. Now, if you're interested in history, you know, and I think sometimes putting tarot in its historic framework is extremely helpful in understanding what you're looking at, then I can recommend a few authors. I guess my favorite author on the history of tarot and someone who I think his style of writing is very engaging is Paul Hewson. And I have these books by him, plus a few others where he collaborates with other people. One is The Devil's Picture Book, and the other is Mystical Origins of Tarot. And he really explain, you know, again, he's not going to teach you how to read the cards. He might give you some interpretive meanings, but it's mostly about getting at the origin stories or the context of when the images were created, you know. And he's like my favorite tarot historian. And another one that I think is also very interesting in explaining origin stories to the cards is Helen Farley's A Cultural History of Tarot. Now, I read this recently, and although I knew most of what was in here, I did learn some things that I didn't know, you know. And her bibliography or her references are almost as thick as the book itself. So she has impeccable research to back up, you know, the thoughts and ideas that she is expressing. And I guess in general, some good books to have are, you know, books like the Visconti Decks, you know, information on the Visconti Decks, which aren't necessarily the oldest or the first tarot decks ever created, but a lot of people think they might be. And so, you know, these books, you know, this one by Giordano Berti and Tiberio Gonard, and this put out by the Il Meneghello folks who create those beautiful decks over in Milan, you know, can give us insight into those Visconti decks, you know, and give us, you know, origin stories upon which all tarots, you know, come from. And lastly, the Noblette tarot deck, the belay. Yeah, I think if you have an E at the end of the word, you pronounce the last sound, and if it doesn't have an E, you don't say it. So I think it would be noble. Correct, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's it. And then this book, is, referencing the Noble Tarot deck, and helps understand what you're looking at when you look at that deck in specific. So I hope this video has been helpful to you. Just because I don't mention a book doesn't mean it's not a good book. It's just maybe one that I don't particularly, think will be helpful, or maybe I haven't read it, But these are the ones that, I think probably would be most helpful to you. And the one that I don't think is I responded to as well is still one that a lot of people recommend, the Jodorowsky. So I included it because, if so many people like it, there must be something to it beyond what I'm seeing, So I wanted to add that. So thank you, Kim R., for suggesting or asking that I, do a video like this. And I hope that it's been beneficial to you, Kim, and everyone else. Until next time, peace and stay well.